Hello and welcome to For Future Generations, Episode 9. It is May the 23rd. Welcome aboard. Hope you're having a wonderful Lord's Day. I am Jeffrey, and I am joined as always by my brilliant co-host, Sean. Sean, welcome aboard.
Yeah, as always, thank you for having me, and thank myself for having myself. We're also joined by the Jolly Brawler himself, Mr. Ethan Holden. He is a self-employed mogul. He is a slumlord, philosopher king, meme king, just an all-around king. And we are very, very glad to have him. Thank you for coming on.
Well, I appreciate you guys for having me on.
Yeah, and thanks for carving the time out of your day. I know that Sunday night isn't always the easiest, with church and everything going on, but we appreciate you carving that out for us tonight. So, for those of you who don't know Ethan Holden, he is on Facebook as Ethan Holden. He is on Twitter as the Jolly Brawler. Find him, follow him. He will give you a barrel of laughs and something to think about to boot. So he's a great guy. But he's one of the things that we want to do with this podcast is we don't want to just black pill. We want to bring a positive idea. We want to bring encouragement. And one of the ways that we can do that is by finding people who have successfully operated in their fields, people who are thoughtful, people who are intelligent, people who are good at what they do. And Ethan is a good example of that. He's got a family business, real estate, like Sean said, slumlords, but somebody's got to be lord of the slums. So, but I wanted to start off, Ethan, kind of give us a little bit of an introduction. Sure. Married with kids. Where do you live, as much as you want to divulge, and sure. What does a day in the life of Ethan Holden look like?
Sure. Well, yeah. So I live in Idaho. I grew up here for most of my life. My dad's military, so we bounced around a little bit, and went to Guam where I met my wife. So I've been married since I was 18 years old, which we just hit 16 years here.
Congratulations.
Last month. I appreciate it. We have one daughter, and that we adopted, and she is 19 years old. And I own a few companies. I started a company with my brother, which is probably our main company. That invests in real estate, and we have a handful that we operate. So I've got a couple of investment companies, property management company, and
a Bitcoin mining operation.
Yeah, right. That's one area I stay out of. So
okay.
But a typical day in my life, it just depends on the time of year. So if we have major projects going on, like we do right now, my days are filled with construction from about 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the morning. Samuel and I will roll out, and we'll come home somewhere between 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. at night. And so lots of construction and managing the businesses out on the go with my laptop. So that's a typical day for us. There are other times of the year. So, there's been a few occasions where we've taken anywhere from 2 to 6 months off, and have just done maintenance on apartments and small little jobs. But other than that, we spend time with our family and travel and do things like that.
For those who don't know, Samuel is your brother. Yeah, I know James White really blew the cover off of that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this, but Samuel,
yeah, he got his little fingers going like this.
Yeah, I had heard. Okay, well.
Yeah. I really hated to break that news to my parents, but they had to know
that. He was mine the whole time? I can't believe this. This is awful.
My dark secret.
Yeah.
But, so I spend most of my days with Samuel. Samuel's the one that I spend the vast majority of my time with. So.
Yeah. And so how did you get into real estate? Was this just like, is this one of those, dad projects where it started off, you're just repairing a place and then you're like, well, let's flip it. And then you end up turning the money over. I mean, how did this whole thing get off the ground?
Yeah, so it kind of started with my it's one of those stories that's hard to tell where it really started because it goes back generations. My grandpa kind of ran businesses, he had rentals, he did things. My dad kind of took it to the next level. He figured out the multifamily aspect. And meanwhile, my dad was Air Force, my grandpa was Air Force. So real estate was always we grew up working construction, and we were taught about real estate. How Samuel and I got into it was I had just got back from the Philippines. Sam moved up here from Texas, and rent was just incredibly high here in Idaho at that time. So I say that in those days, like a 2-bedroom apartment was $700, and that was insane money in those days. I mean, we were like, there's no way we're paying that for rent. And so Samuel and I got together and talked about, hey, what if we tried to scrap some money together and buy a duplex? I'll live in one half, you live in the other, and we'll split the mortgage.
There you go.
And so we went and found an atypical duplex, meaning that the utilities weren't split on it, so it wasn't like a legal duplex.
Gotcha.
And we moved into that, and I think our mortgage was like $800, so we each paid $400 to live there. Whoa. And so we did that for 11 months. And in that 11 months, so starting from when we bought that property under Samuel's name, I went and got myself a property under my own name, which was a 4-plex. Samuel's fiance, who's now his wife, went and got a 4-plex. And then at the end of that 11 months, Samuel and his wife were getting ready to have a baby, and we needed a bigger place. So we found an owner finance deal, and which was a big property, 3/4 of an acre with a huge house on it. And so we bought that and converted it into a duplex. And we've been living on that property ever since.
Where did the startup money for all this, where did it all start? Like, did you just have a pile of
Qatar?
Yeah. Yeah. So it was actually, we did not have a lot of money because I had walked away from a job in Texas and went over to the Philippines to join the mission field with my family. By the time that I got back to the States, I might have had $3,000 to my name. And so I started working at the post office, and I was just socking away as much money as I possibly could. We were living very frugally. And Samuel has always been like a ridiculously good saver. So Sam was living down in Texas at the time, and he was working and just socking away as much money as he could. So he had maybe 10 or 15 grand, something like that. And by the time that I got started, I had 10 or 15 grand. And so when he used the FHA loan to buy that first place, you only have to put 3.5% down. So it's just a few grand to buy our first place.
Mm-hmm. And what timeline about is this? Is this like, this is not 2008 when everything's kind of affordable. No. This is
2017 when Idaho was still the fastest growing state at that time. Mortgage prices were just going through the roof. Everybody was telling us don't buy because it's getting ready to crash, and it did. And of course it's,
and that's what they're saying right now. And I'm just
of course. Yeah. It was, it was one of those things that we had to kind of go against everybody's advice and just say, well, I'm either going to pay that money to a mortgage or I'm going to pay it to rent. And so we're going to roll the dice on a mortgage.
There you go.
Okay. But then, so you and Samuel, you have the duplex.
Yep.
Where does the money come to just start buying properties after that?
So a couple of things. One, when we closed on the duplex, our realtor told us at the time, because we were brand new to this, I had only bought one house. Oh yeah, that's actually another part of this. I had a house in Texas, and I sold it, and I had it for 5 years, and I cleared 20 grand off that house. And so that came in right at the time that I needed it to start buying. And so that 20 grand is what we used to start putting down money on all of our future purchases. And then on top of that, because that was not enough to buy 4 places back to back. So within 11 months, we went from 0 houses to, I think, 12 units.
Oh my.
Whoa.
Within 11 months. So it just kind of skyrocketed really fast. So what happened was our realtor wisely told us to, when we go to close on this, he's like, don't take any don't put any exceptions in there. Don't say, hey, I need a contingency for an inspection or any of this stuff, because we could do our own inspections. He said, just put in there that you want 2% cash back at closing. And so I guess how that kind of worked was the owners looked at it and said, hey, this is contingency free. These guys are, that makes it an easy transaction. All they're asking for is this 2% back, which is, it sounds kind of like a measly number, but when you're talking about $150,000, 2% of that's $3,000.
Yeah.
Well, $3,000 paid for over half of our down payment. And so we were able to kind of bank save quite a bit of that money and then go on to the next one.
Gotcha.
And some of that came, pooling resources. I would move Sam's money over into my account. I'd move my money over into Sam's account, and to satisfy the lenders.
Mm-hmm.
I see.
Those cash backs, those cash back deals is kind of what kept us. Like, by the time that we closed our final house, we were bone dry. Like, it was just those cash back deals that helped us to
riding the wave from one to the next.
That's right. Yeah.
So, money laundering 101.
Right.
But legal laundering, so to
legal. Speak. We did it by the book. And, and the last house that we bought, so the one that we live in now, was, almost miraculous how it all worked out. It was back when Craigslist was still the big thing. And I started communicating on Craigslist with this guy who's got this house for sale. Samuel is under the gun because his family is starting to form. He needs room. And so things are getting a little bit tense because we're just in this tiny little duplex, and I'm communicating back and forth with this guy on Craigslist. Well, if you remember, Craigslist would kind of hide your email address, so you have no idea who you're talking to.
Yeah.
And so the guy finally, he comes in, he says, hey, this is what I want. I want $60,000 down, a balloon payment in 3 years, and 10% interest. And as kind of a Hail Mary, because I knew what position Samuel was in, I said, hey, here's what I can do. I'll give you $10,000 down, 6% interest. You carry it for a full 30 years. And he, thinking I'm never going to hear back from this guy. So he writes me and says, yeah, I can do that. Why don't you come by on Saturday and I'll show you the house. So I get my dad and my family, and we all come out here to the house, and the guy opens the door, and it's a guy who goes to my church, who I've known for years, for 2 or 3 years by this point. And he's been in our home. We've been in his home. And so right there, I knew, okay, the Lord's working here.
Yeah.
And it ended up being just the absolute perfect house for us.
There you go.
Wow.
So
that's cool. That's cool.
We've got a friend saying hi to us.
He's the king, man.
JVDM. Good to see you, man.
I love Jesse.
I feel like I know nothing but kings. Like that's all it is.
Kings know kings, man. That's how it goes.
Yeah. Real recognizes real.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you said in the chat before we went live, you've been married for 16 years now. And you grew up mostly in Idaho, but then you went overseas a little bit. So, how did that whole thing happen? How did, you and your wife meet? How did that household get established? What's the skinny on that?
Yeah, that was actually kind of a crazy story. So when I was 16, my dad was actually just getting ready to hit retirement in the Air Force. And they came in, it was like 6 months before he was eligible to retire. They came in and they gave him 4 years and orders for 4 years. He had to take them. And so we went over to Guam when I was 16 and went over there. I had never left Idaho before, and we were bouncing around from church to church trying to find a good church. Now, back in those days, we were Pentecostals. So we were hitting all the Pentecostal churches.
It's very hard to find a good Pentecostal church.
Yeah. Yeah. Some would say impossible. So it was
one might say.
Yeah. So, and that's, so we tried a bunch of Pentecostal churches, and we found this little Foursquare church that was right above like a Halloween store. Mm-hmm. And, so I walked in, and when you walk through the doors, there's kind of 2 paths that both converge back into the congregation. And I could hear somebody singing. We got there a little bit late. Mm-hmm. And so I walked around the corner, and it was my wife was singing on the stage. And I was struck immediately. And so that day, I talked with a couple of people there and just kind of tried to buy some time so I could get over and talk with her. And the pastor came over and was talking to me and said, "Hey, I want to introduce you to my niece." And he brought my wife over, and that's how I got introduced to her. And she was doing some stuff with the youth, and I said, "Oh man, I'm like super interested in the youth group. So maybe I should get your number, and I'll give you a call
now that you're
tonight."
in the youth group, you know,
Yeah.
I'm super interested.
Yep. So I said, "Yeah, I want to call. I'll give you a call, and we can talk about some youth stuff." And so that's how I got her number, and took 6 months to convince her to go out with me, and then been together ever since.
Wow. So so you were smitten, and she wasn't necessarily drinking the Kool-Aid just yet.
Not yet. It took a long time. She wasn't looking to date. She wanted to, her uncle and aunt had kind of convinced her that she needed to go to college. She needed to fly out to Arizona and join a college. And so she's kind of putting everything off because that was her plan, was to leave. And took her 6 months to tell her, "You don't need to go to college, and you need to marry me."
And you saved her from the witch's tower just like that.
And she's thankful ever since. So
there you go. All right.
Yeah,
So
I don't know if this is if this is someone taking a pot shot, or if they don't actually know you. I don't know.
is probably Josh's.
Oh, he knows me.
Oh,
No, that's Ethan's alt.
Yeah.
He's just in here talking about how cool he is. No, I think I'm friends with him too. Yeah. So
Josh is a great guy.
All right. Is he a local to you, or is he a?
No, I don't know where he's at. Actually, I'm just in some chats with him, and he is maybe one of the funniest people I've ever encountered. So
cool. Well, it's like Sean said. You know, we're surrounded by kings. You know,
absolutely.
When I fell into this group of friends, and I started realizing online right wing extremists, it was like, man, you know, there's. You know, the meme of, you know, right wing online guys are all just, you know, incels living in their mom's basement who don't know how to shave or bathe themselves or talk to girls. And it's like, you know, every single guy I know who's a right wing, you know, extremist online is an absolute Chad.
Yeah.
You know, has the respect of his peers, and, you know, invariably, you know, married to a beautiful woman, has beautiful children and a wonderful family life, and their life isn't falling apart. You know,
well, that's been my experience too, and that's why when you see stuff, I don't know if we want to get into controversies here, but when you see like Wilson posting things like, these guys are low income incels, late night at the convenience store, you know, either, you know, and he said at one point that either I don't have a relationship with my dad, or my dad's not worth having a relationship with, those kinds of things. And then you go,
and he said that about you specifically.
Yeah. We were going back and forth on Twitter, and he was, you know, basically saying I don't have a dad. And I said, no, actually very close with my dad, closer with him than almost anybody. And he was like, well, you know, basically, if you are close to your dad, then you don't have a dad worth being close with because of your politics. I just thought, yeah, I'm going to punch you in the mouth next time I'm in Moscow. But yeah, that's been my experience too. I mean, these guys, they are all accomplished, kind. Like, you would think that with how rowdy a lot of these guys are online, that they'd be jerks and uncaring, but they're not. I mean, it's the greatest group of people I've ever really been associated with.
Yeah, it's weird how everyone seemed to come together. I remember there was like kind of a witch hunt that brought me into the fold.
Same.
You know, our friend Jesse here reached out to me after all that, and you know, some little pipsqueak with a whiny voice and a website and all that came after a bunch of us, and we all just became friends after that. And it's pretty wild. Yeah.
It is funny how opposition unites. And I think that's a lesson that a lot of Americans, you know, right now, as we're in this moment where it's like, who are we as a people? Who are we as a nation? It's like, you hear a lot people say, well, you can't be defined by what you oppose. And it's like, I don't know, man. That sounds like a pretty good system to me. You know, we're united by, we oppose, you know, sodomy, we oppose cross-dressers, we oppose, you know, the homosexuality in the church, both overt and covert. You know, we believe in, you know, men with chests, and that's a controversial thing right now. But
Yeah.
you find the people who believe in those things, who say, "Yeah, we're willing to take a stand," and you find the salt of the earth people, the men who are not to be cowed. It's a great thing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is a good example. I mean, you got 10 years ago, the only time that the three of us would have interacted was to debate Presbyterianism versus Lutheranism versus
Yeah.
being
Mhm.
Baptist. And
Yeah.
now that's the furthest thing from any of our minds because we have these big fights on our hands.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've
So
got
it has kind of pulled a disparate group, Anglicans and everybody, into this fold.
Yeah.
bigger fish to fry.
Yeah, I don't even really hate Catholics anymore.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I've just kind of gotten like, okay,
Yeah.
you got, we're different. That's cool.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Well, I mean, after talking with Samuel Johnson, previous interview we did, he's the monarchy respecter.
Yeah.
After talking to him, I'm kind of like, I don't know. I think I like the Catholics better than I like the Covenanters. They don't tell me I'm going to hell for celebrating Christmas.
Right. Covenanters, abolitionists, and R2K guys, they're the ones that make it very, very hard to be small C Catholic.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
And the thing is, even with like R2K guys and abolitionists, it'll be like, I agree with you on this thing, but could you just not be, a jerk about it? Yeah. Could you just try to not be an insufferable dingus for half a second?
Spangler is he's their rescue for the Covenanters. He's the one, man.
Yeah.
He's a good
I don't
dude.
badmouth Covenanters because I know Spangler. That's it.
There you go. Yeah. And I don't badmouth abolitionists because I'm friends with a couple of them, but I got to bite my tongue sometimes. But so talking about men who will not be cowed, and your businesses that you've run. So you started your business. You were saying you started this real estate thing about 2017 or so, and so what anybody who's running their own business and went through 2020 and the lockdowns and the COVID restrictions, what did that look like for you? How did that affect your business?
So there was a lot going on in those times, and so basically, it wasn't so bad for us as landlords, as investors. It wasn't so bad. We had to kind of kick things up into high gear in one way, and that is, so the state of Idaho had a fund set aside for paying rents and mortgages and utilities and things like that. And so about 75% of my tenants, so at that time, I think I had about 100, close to 100 units at that time. And so about 75 of those 100 people lost their jobs or had a significant reduction in hours, reduction in pay.
Yeah.
It hit really hard. The ones who weren't affected was like military. A lot of our military people were just fine. But everybody else, I mean, they got wiped out real hard. So what we did, Samuel and I sat down, we talked with some of the owners that we work with. We made rules for our own company to say what we were going to do. And one of the things that we decided was we were not going to evict anybody who was trying, who was giving it an honest go. So if that meant that we were going to have to tighten our belts and sell off assets and do whatever we need to do, we're going to keep these people in their homes. And so one of the things that came out of that was I ended up doing mountains and mountains of paperwork to get help for any of these tenants that had lost their jobs or had significant reductions in their hours and pay. And so I would file applications because the applications were pretty tricky. And if the tenant messed it up, a lot of times it would push them out like a month or two before they could get help. And so just to kind of cut all of that out, I just decided I am going to do all of the legwork to get these applications done correctly. I'm going to build relationships with the people who, receive these applications and read them. And so I hunkered down and just kind of did paperwork for a couple of years. And, the upside was this fund paid all of the rent for these people. And so I wasn't really missing a ton of money. We did take some hits, but overall we were made whole. So we came out okay. But the big upside was we made it through that entire time without having to kick out or evict a single person. which is
fantastic.
We
Wow.
were pumped. I mean, we were glad to navigate those waters. So
That's really, I mean, first of all, that's great to hear, but it's also, to me, an ironic thing to hear, because some of the memes that you and your brother share about evicting single mothers are just hilarious.
Yeah. It's we, honestly, we bend over backwards not to evict people in general, because in Idaho, if you get evicted, the likelihood of you renting again is slim. I mean, because the market is so hot here that nobody wants somebody who's been evicted. So it's like, we're not trying to like just do long-term damage to somebody. Sometimes it does happen, but we will work with people as much as we possibly can to avoid that. And sometimes it's even, we care about it more than they do a lot of times. Mm-hmm. When the time comes where they are not responding, they're not trying, at some point you have to evict. But
yeah. That's why I was gonna say, I remember a specific story about a crazy party, and I was like, surely you evicted that guy, right?
I didn't.
Really?
Nope. All I did kick them out, but I didn't. So when you say evict is a legal process. So it'll hit their credit, it'll hit their rental history. Mm-hmm. I will give people the option to leave voluntarily.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's no negative effect. And I'll just tell them, don't put me down as a reference. I will not give you a good reference.
Yeah.
And so even through COVID, I didn't have to kick anybody else. I didn't have to kick anybody out either, but I didn't evict, so I will give people the option to voluntarily leave before I will evict them.
Yeah. It's not me, it's you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's a big thing for us for several reasons. One, to protect the tenants, because a lot of times these guys are, they're young, they're trying to figure things out.
Yeah.
And while a lot of other property management companies in my area have an eviction rate of like 25% or 40%.
Really? Wow.
We have an eviction rate of less than 1%. So
wow.
It's a last ditch effort for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my dad's been in real estate. He's not anything big, just like four houses or something like that. And in the 6 or 8 years that we've been doing it, we've only ever had to evict one guy. Nice. And it was just because he was harassing our other tenants. It was like, we can't have you here doing that, man.
Yeah.
And then when we told him, could you please leave? No, you're going to have to get the law involved. And we're like, okay, that is the next step.
Yeah.
And then he got evicted, and he moved one lot over and started renting there. But he stopped causing problems for us and our tenants. So
yeah, that's a win. It's one of those things that even I we will not take people who have an eviction on their record, and that's why. It's because what that tells me is that person did not voluntarily leave. They did not make things financially right with their previous landlord. You made your landlord go through a legal process to get you out of there. I don't want to work with somebody like that.
Yeah.
So
that's a good rule of thumb. Don't lend to people who have been evicted if you can help it.
Yeah. And one more thing about the COVID thing. So Idaho did pretty well overall with all of that. Our mayor did very well. But they did come out for a time and restrict evictions for like 2 months. They said they put a moratorium on evictions.
Yeah.
And so I wrote my mayor a letter and basically said, hey, if this continues, all that's going to happen is that landlords and property managers are going to raise their criteria for who they'll allow to get into their house. And so people who you are interested in protecting, like single mothers and young people and minorities, that's their big push. They will not be able to get into a house, because if you take away the tool of an eviction and we have nothing that we can combat their non-payment with, then we will not rent to them. We'll say, okay, you have to have a credit score of 700. You have to make triple the rent. It has to be a very, very safe bet if you take away those tools from us.
Yeah, and you have to have oh shoot, I forgot what it's called now that I'm trying to say it. But the closing thing where it's like, we hold on to your money in case you broke something.
Yeah, a security deposit or or last month's rent.
The security deposit and last month's rent is going to be really, really high to try and cover all of those pipes that you clogged with the underwear you flushed.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like,
And to their credit, they took the moratorium off very, very quickly,
mhm,
and so Idaho came out of that whole thing doing well.
mhm.
So
Yeah,
That's good.
that's
So
good. Yeah.
I want to ask before we get too far away from talking about the rental properties.
yeah,
So that is something I would love to get into. Me
sure.
and my wife talk about this all the time. Could you walk? I don't know if this would take too
Yeah.
long, but could you walk through that process to go from like 0 to 60? What does that actually look like
Sure.
normally? Because it sounds like you had. I mean, first of all, I don't have family around me, so I don't just have like a brother who comes over. Hey, let's go knock down walls and
Mhm.
all that kind of stuff.
You don't
Yeah.
have a
like-
brother who's good at saving money and has 15K in the bank for a down payment?
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk. Just
Who doesn't
so-
have a brother like that?
yeah, just poor folk like us.
Sure.
What are we doing to get started? First rental property.
Yeah. So I would say, people use different methods when it comes to real estate. Some people want to be wholesalers, some people want to be flippers, long-term rentals, short-term rentals, multifamily, single family, and so finding out which will suit you best is probably the most important thing, because that'll at least tell you what path you need to go down. There's a reason why I chose the path that I chose, which is long-term investment. I don't buy and sell. I don't flip. I don't do any of that. I've done one flip my whole life. Long-term holding, coupled with multifamily. So I don't buy single-family homes. So once you establish what kind of path you want to go down, there's just so many resources out there for any of these paths. So I'm a big fan of multifamily long-term hold. And if I was going to try to persuade somebody into going into this, what I would say is you want to look for, like, let's say money's tight, things like that. You want to try to use an FHA loan if you can. It's 3.5% down. But even traditional loans now, or conventional loans, are typically 5% down. So it's not terrible like it used to be. And then when you go to look, you want to set your criteria very strict, which would be you want something that's either already multifamily or something that could be turned into multifamily fairly easily with some work.
So familiarize yourself with the zoning laws, because that will depend very much on your location.
Right. And so like an example of something that is a single family but could be made a multifamily easily would be something that like has a basement that could be finished out.
Mm-hmm. With its own door.
With its own door.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's a very quick way to get a duplex. And so I'm actually working with a brother. I don't want to put his business out there. Somebody that we all know, though. And he bought a house that has a basement. He is in the process right now of converting it into a rental. His mortgage, I want to say, is like $1,800. And I went and just did a market study on his property, on his area. And for what he's going to be putting in there, he'll probably be able to get probably $1,100 pretty easily, or maybe $1,300 with all utilities included.
Man, that makes that mortgage nice.
Yeah. It eats up the vast majority of your mortgage, which enables you to start saving a few grand over the years to purchase your next place.
Mm-hmm.
After you've purchased something, you only have to live there for, technically it's 10 months. They say 1 year, but it's technically 10 months. And you can already, if you had the funds on hand, you can already go to make your next purchase. One of the big upsides to purchasing multifamily is that you use the same loans as when you buy a single family. So it's no additional work. It's the same paperwork and all of that. And the added benefit is, like, let's say you're going to go buy a fourplex and they come in, they say, okay, hey, you qualify for $250,000 for a house. And you go, well, I'm actually interested in this fourplex over here. They'll say, oh, okay, well, in that case, you're actually approved for $450,000.
Oh, wow.
And the reason they'll approve you for more is because they'll look at that. They'll say, okay, you have to live in one unit, but you can rent out 3 units. The market rent on those is $1,400 each. So you have an additional, what is that, $4,200, something like that. You have an additional, that amount is additional income that we can count towards your purchase. And or if you're in a duplex, it'll be 50-50. They'll say, okay, you can, this extra $1,100 is now income, and so now you qualify for this amount.
Mm-hmm.
Same paperwork, same loans, so it's no additional work. The big downside is, especially if you're married or if you have children, you're expected to live in that property for a year, you know,
Yeah.
and so you're living next to your tenants.
Yeah,
and that
so
could
you want to make sure they're good.
You want to make sure they're good. And the thing is, a lot of times you're inheriting tenants when you buy these properties. So you don't know what you're dealing with, which is, there's some fun stories of that too. But, but you know, if you're willing to kind of eat it for a period of time and just live in an apartment and be surrounded by tenants and do that, you could really be set up for the rest of your life with just with just the one fourplex or one duplex. You will establish an income floor that will begin to kind of free you up from having to have a job at all times.
Yeah, or at least, you know, a long hours away from home kind of a job. You can relax into something a little more easy on the schedule, a little more work from home.
How many beds and baths are you saying? How many would you expect if you're going into that fourplex situation for your dwelling?
Yeah. So like if I'm actually going to be living in the apartment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, with me, you know, at the time that I was doing all the purchasing, it was just me and my wife. So we could do it with just a studio or one bedroom if we needed to.
Right. Okay.
But when I'm looking to purchase something, I'm really open to all different sizes because there's such a huge market for studios, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 bedrooms. But typically getting somewhere between a studio and a 2 bedroom is going to be significantly cheaper. If you start going to 3 bedroom, the price just goes through the roof.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So do the rents.
Yeah. But also, you know, you know, as well, you know, when you get these houses that have like 3 and 4 bedroom, it's, you know, the rent is higher and, you know, but the people that are looking for those are also fewer and further between. So it does just make everything just a little bit more complicated, unfortunately.
That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And with Samuel and I, like we've bought, in fact, probably our most profitable property we purchased without ever even going to see it. Because to us, we did not care about the building itself. We cared about the income. So we looked at, okay, what's coming in, what's going to go out, pull the trigger. And so we ended up buying this property without ever even going to look at it.
Wow.
And we sent somebody over there, just go look at the foundation right quick.
Yeah. Make sure it's not about to fall over.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of that, some of that you can't do if you don't, like I have a dad who can build anything, fix anything. If I got in a bind, I have a dad who I can call.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were a lot more freed up to do those kinds of things. I don't recommend that for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
John
or
Carter,
like with you, Sean, I know you know how to do roofing. And so if you buy a place, that could be a huge thing for you because a lot of people will not buy a place that has a bad roof.
Oh, that's nothing. That's nothing. I did I had called a buddy over who owns a roofing company, and me and him, with literally hammers, not even nail guns, we did the roof right above me right here.
Okay.
So that I could have this area outside the house with the actual roof. So yeah. I mean that's a great point. Like if there's something you can do.
Yep.
Like if you're a drywall guy, you don't have to pay a drywall guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
and there's a lot of things that are not as complicated as you think they are. Drywall is not rocket science.
Right.
I mean, walk onto a job site, go into one of these houses they're building and look at who they've got drywalling. It's not a bunch of Einsteins.
It's a crack.
Yeah. I mean,
it's impressive to watch them, but
a lot of these guys are good people and they're highly skilled at what they're doing. But the reason they're skilled at it is because they've been doing it every day for the last 5-10 years. And it's like, it's not, I mean, there's so many things. It's like working on your car. Working on your car is not hard. It's just, you have to figure it out. Doing drywall is not hard. You just have to know what you're doing. Replacing shingles is not hard. You just have to not be scared of heights.
Yeah, there's that.
I mean, I had one friend who got up on a roof with me one time. We were clearing some brush. We had a tree overhanging the roof, and it was dropping leaves that were starting to cause some rot. And we're like, let's just clear this back. And he did not tell me this, but we got up on this roof, and it's just a one story. And he's looking, he's looking at the edge, and he's staying like 20 feet away from it. I'm like, dude, the tree's right here. You got to get right here and catch this thing as I'm cutting it. He's like, dude, I can't do this. I can't do this. Well, should have told me when I asked you if you could come help me.
Right.
but every job's like that. There's perks to knowing how to do your own stuff. Yeah. But there are also moments when it's like, your time is also valuable.
Yeah.
You got to know what your time is worth so that you don't spend all of your time capital doing things that you could hire somebody else to do. So it's a fine balance, but having skills is always good.
Yeah, I'll say two things. One, even to this day, if Sam and I walk into a property and that we're looking at buying and it reeks of cat urine and smoke and things like that, we're like, heck yeah, like we are getting this, because it freaks everybody else out, and we know how to take care of it. So,
yeah.
But going back to what you were saying about having certain skills and that come in that are valuable. Samuel and I did a project about 3 years ago. It was the project that kind of got us over the hump financially, and it was that second fourplex that his now wife had purchased, the one I mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. And Samuel walked in there at one point, and he said, man, we could split all of these units in half and have nice one bed, because it was really, really run down when we bought it. And he said, we could split all of these units in half, have double the units, and make them really, really nice. And so we went in there young and dumb, didn't know what we were doing. And basically, it took us 54 weeks, 55 weeks. And we gutted that entire building and built 8 brand new apartments out of it. And I talked to a contractor. I walked him through everything that we were doing and everything. And I asked him, how much would this cost if I had you do this? And I think he came back with like $1.2 million is what it would have cost me to have him do it.
Yeah.
We did it for $90,000 and a year of our time. Mm-hmm. And it took that property from cash flowing like maybe $1,500 a month to cash flowing like $10,000 a month. Mm-hmm. It was a huge jump in value because we did it ourselves. And so you basically, it's almost like buying 4 additional units for $90,000 and a year of your time.
Yeah.
So it was by far probably the best investment we've ever made.
Yeah. Those are special opportunities.
Another thing that people think is crazier than it actually is, because you had mentioned like smoke or cat pee or whatever. Yeah. Termites are not as big of a deal as people think they are.
Sure.
It just doesn't make sense. Like there'll be termites on like 2 pieces of wood. You replace 2 pieces of wood and now there's not termite damage.
Yeah. Right. Well, especially if you've got a concrete slab, it's like if you've got termites and termites, most people don't know this, but termites start at the bottom and work their way up.
Right.
So it's like if you've got termites in a building and all they're eating is the baseboard and like the bottom plate.
The bottom plate, yeah.
It's like, you pull out a wall, you change out parts of the bottom plate that look bad, you get an exterminator in there to get rid of the termites. And as long as they haven't made their way all the way to the attic, if you've got termites in the attic, it's like, okay,
you're cooked.
Yeah.
Another thing,
start over.
Another thing with termites, the biggest termite treatment on the market right now is just using fipronil.
Really?
It's what is the active ingredient in most flea collars. It's like literally just get a fipronil based product, treat around the perimeter. That's
you can buy treatment. It at Tractor Supply.
Oh
in like a 1 gallon jug. Yeah. I've got dogs and chickens and stuff. My wife is, typical white woman. She's got chickens, and garden. And it's like, I was looking into like a flea collar for my cats and my dogs. And, so little tangent. A friend of mine was hunting one day and he found this little baby wild hog. And the mom was gone. So he kind of adopted it and was raising it. And he gave it to us. He was like, are y'all interested in this? And I was like, yeah, we'll raise it, turn it into some bacon. And poor thing was just covered in hog lice. And I mean, people lice you can't see because they're so small. Hog lice are like the size of a dime. They're big.
Oh man.
And so I looked up on the internet. I'm like, what do you do for hog lice? And they're like, oh, you buy the stuff at Tractor Supply, spray it on the hog, and it kills them. So I did, and this stuff's magic. It just took them out. And I looked into the other uses for it, and it's like you spray it on your cattle, you spray it on the areas where you don't want fleas and lice and termites and just everything. And I was like, dude, looking at flea collars, the ingredient in flea collars is this chemical. And it's like, well, I'll just put it in a spray bottle, spray it on them. Yep. Yeah. So there's a lot of things.
Everything.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that if you know about just little tricks like that, where it's like you don't need to hire somebody to come and do this, that, and the other, but you have to know that there is something going on.
So, you can't get freaked out. If you get freaked out about stuff like smells and termites or that deal that I was just talking about, we picked it up because basically the tenants had kind of banded together and said that they weren't going to pay rent. And the previous owner was from Seattle, Washington. And so he was used to the way Seattle handles things, which is pretty gay. And Idaho is not that way. And so we ended up getting a decent deal on it because it was kind of a property in distress. And then on top of that, there was homeless people in the basement that were having sex parties. And I walked down there and found a big bag of heroin and needles, brass knuckles, liquor bottles. Had to run these guys out there. I mean, fights out in the parking lot. I was out there till 2:00 in the morning for about a year, just towing car after car after car.
Oh my word.
Having to square up with people. They're throwing stuff at our dumpster. I try to politely tell them, hey, don't do that. And they want to fight over it. And so, I mean, it was one of those things where it's like, as long as you don't get too intimidated by things, there are ways to fix anything. Mm-hmm. Anything can be fixed. So just don't get freaked out about it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and when a guy shows up and he says he's going to shoot you with his BB gun, don't blow him away. There's a video that went around the internet a while back of the dumpster defenders, and some guy was trying to throw away a mattress in their dumpster and it turned into a big altercation. Live streamed it on the internet, and they showed up with a Glock and a shotgun, and this guy got in over his head, had a temper, and it's never a good sign when somebody's arguing with you. He's like, "What, are you going to shoot me?" It's like, I didn't bring this gun out here for decoration.
Right.
So, that's what happened. They shot him, and
wow,
things can escalate very quickly. So you got to have a cool head on you as well.
For sure. Yeah. There's been times where, I mean, there have been many, many times where things could have turned very, very violent very quickly in this particular property. And I've been fortunate, usually I'm there with Samuel as well. So it'd always be 2-on-1 because we're not going to fight fair. Like, I'm going to use a pipe wrench on you.
Yeah.
And I carry a gun. And Idaho's a safe place. That's a safe area. But it was just so neglected back then. Everything had been overgrown. There's a bar right down the street. So all the bar flies would park in our parking lot. And so defending our tenants, and that's the thing, the tenants pay for these things.
Yeah.
And so I would try to reason with these guys and say, listen, I'm trying to protect my tenants. They paid to have this parking spot. They pay to use that dumpster. That's all I'm asking. And a lot of times they would say, okay, that's good. But a lot of times they would try to square up with you.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Especially if they've already got some liquor in them.
Right. Yeah. All that liquid courage.
Yeah. That Dutch courage. It'll make you charge the Spanish lines.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we've talked about COVID and how it affected business as a lender. But, when it comes to, daily life, there was, right now, when you go online and you read about people talking about, leftists talking about the lockdowns, they're like, everybody was complaining. Nobody, there were no forced vaccinations. You're just making it up and nothing really happened. Nobody got arrested. And, there's been a couple times where I was talking to people in real life and they said, nobody ever got arrested because of COVID. You're just getting, romantic about it. And I said, actually, I know some guys who literally got arrested because of COVID. So, tell us, about the lockdowns. What were the lockdowns like where you were, and at the time when they started restricting things, how did those affect you? And then, if you could kind of go from that into the story that I'm making reference to.
Yeah, yeah. So my particular county is considered the most fiscally conservative county in America.
Mm-hmm.
So my county did really, really well. They never locked down. They told everybody, hey, basically the mayor put out a video and just said, hey, you guys know what's best for your family and your situation. Do what's best for your family. And so my county did just fine. Boise has a very liberal mayor. I want to say she came in from Portland some years ago and has Portland money. And so it's a very different story in Ada County, where Boise's at. The lockdowns were a little bit more severe there, but still, as on a national stage, like compared to what was going on in California and other places, it still was pretty mild. The story that you're making reference to, so I think kind of the wild part about this is that would have been like 2023. So this is way after, like, COVID had been done. Like nobody was requiring masks anymore. Lockdowns hadn't been for a long time. And basically what happened was Samuel and I had just put in a full day of work. I came home, got in the shower. I was getting out and my phone starts going off, and it's my cousin. So I picked up the phone, and he explained that he had just had an accident on his farm, and it was a freaky thing. Nobody could have prevented it. I mean, it was a bad accident with a horse. The horse ended up crushing his 2-year-old daughter. And it was she had just turned 2 the night before. We were all up at a cabin celebrating her 2nd birthday. The week prior, Samuel and I had just finished framing her room. They had just moved into a place, and we framed up a bedroom for her and all of that. And so she was a very big part of our family. And this freak accident happens. He calls and says that, we've got her at the hospital in this little country town in Idaho. And we just need prayer because it's not looking good. And so Samuel and I immediately jumped in the truck and flew out to that little town to go and spend time with them and see what was going on. By the time we got there, Life Flight had touched down, and they had loaded our little cousin onto the helicopter, and they flew her to Boise with her mother. And so Samuel took our rig, and he just drove as fast as he could to get to Boise. My cousin, the father of the little girl, and I got into his pickup and took off for Boise to go to the hospital. And he's got a big 12 valve Cummins. He's a big Cummins guy. And so he was, no exaggeration, I mean, he was blowing straight through these roundabouts. He was not going around them. He's just driving right over the top and going. And we made it to Boise in record time. And by the time that we got there, they had pronounced her dead. And it was a rough night. So we all go into the hospital, and it's the emergency room. And it's this huge, probably 60, 70 foot long corridor. And the only people who are in the building besides in that area was just my family and one family friend. When we came through the doors, there was a nurse, she's not technically a nurse. She works the computers up at the front. And Samuel and I knew from the get-go she was going to be a problem. And basically she came over and told us, you guys have to put masks on if you're going to be here. We're like, no, we're not doing that. And so she left, came back a few minutes later. You guys got to put masks on. We told her we're not doing it. So she goes, okay, you guys have to leave. And so we're like, no, we're not leaving, and we're not putting masks on. So just go away. So they sent the security guards over, and they came over and tried to reason with us. And I just told them, hey, we're not doing it. So we're not putting a mask on. 1, because we were so far past COVID. 2, because it doesn't do anything. And 3, it's because we're not going to spend the last few moments with this little girl wearing a mask. And so he sent over his supervisor, who brought a dog over, I think, to try to intimidate us. And we told him to take a hike. Then they sent over the big guy. And he came over and tried to convince us to put a mask on, tried to argue with us. And we just finally said, listen, we are not putting a mask on, and we're not leaving voluntarily. Whatever you have to do, if you have to go call the cops, whatever you have to do, go do it. But do not come back over here and interrupt our family again. And he said, okay, we'll go call the cops. So they went and called the cops. Took the cops like 45 minutes to even arrive. They came over, told us to put a mask on. We told them no. And they said, okay, we got to leave then. And we said, we're not leaving unless we're leaving in cuffs. I said, if you arrest us, we're not going to resist, but we're not leaving voluntarily unless you're hauling us out in cuffs. So the cops did not want to arrest us. And so they forced the hospital to put us under citizen's arrest. And they made them sit there for like another hour and fill out paperwork to put us under a citizen's arrest, which I don't know anything about that. So basically we spent, by this time it's like midnight. Or it's like 11:30. So finally all the paperwork's done. The cops come over and say, try to give us one more chance. We refuse. So they arrest us. And those pictures, you guys have probably seen the pictures. My dad actually took those pictures of us getting arrested. And so the whole time they're cuffing us, the cops are talking to me and Sam both. We're just side by side, and they're whispering in our ears, which I don't like, and not a big fan of that. And they're saying like, hey, I get it. I don't want to have to do this, but I have to. This is my job. And Sam and I both had the same response to it. The cops just said, hey, the faggotry has to end somewhere. Okay, so it didn't end with the hospital administrator. It didn't end with the charge nurse. It didn't end with the security guard or the second security guard or the third security guard. And now you guys are refusing to stand up. And so now it falls down to a grieving family to say, no, we're not going to participate in this lie. We're not spending the last few hours of our time with a mask on our face. And if you want to, do your job, then do it. But don't whisper in my ear and tell me how we're all friends and we all agree. And so they got quiet after that and they arrested us. And kind of the funny thing was, like I said, I had already showered and cleaned up from the workday. Sam was still in his overalls.
Yeah.
So they patted me down. It took 5 seconds. Well, Sam's overalls had like 100 pockets on them. So they're pulling knives and screws and all tools out of it. And so they sat me in the back of the car. I'm waiting for like 10 minutes. They're still patting them down. And they basically said like, hey, you guys you're on good behavior, so we'll let you ride together. And so we rode together, and I would say like we behaved in a way that honored Christ. Like we were very straightforward with the cops, but we didn't behave like jackasses in the hospital. So they took us to jail. They put us in a holding cell, and the holding cell is like a giant room. It's not an actual like jail cell; it's just a room, and you have access to all the sheriff's deputies there. And so as soon as we get on there, they came over and just said, hey, it's really cool what you guys did. They're very encouraging. And so Sam and I went up to the desk and we just said, hey, when we get out of here, what happens if we go back to the hospital after they've trespassed us? And they're like, don't do that. Don't go back to the hospital. It's going to double your fines. It's going to be a more serious thing. And we're like, okay, but like what happens if we do it? And so they told us what happens. And so we were like, all right. So we, this kind of ties into the investing a little bit. One of the cops was telling us on the way over there, he's like, this is the kind of stuff that's going to ruin your life when you do things like this. This will ruin your life. And I told him, I said, actually, I'm a real estate investor. I said, when I get out of jail in a couple of hours, I will have more money than when I went into jail. So it's not going to ruin my life. I'll be just fine. And so we ended up posting bail. My dad comes over and picks me up. And again, this is the Lord working stuff out for us. We drive, we go right back to the hospital. And as I'm walking up to the doors, I could see through the glass doors, my cousin and his wife are coming out from saying their final goodbyes to their daughter. And as they walk out, they hug their mom. And the next person they would hug would be me and Sam. And we walked through the doors right as they finished hugging their mom. They hugged me and Sam and my dad. We spent another hour there with the security guards glaring at us and the nurses glaring at us. We spent another hour there and went home that night. And I think one of the good things that came out of that, a couple of things. One was my cousin was back in the room with his daughter the entire time, so they had no idea any of this was going on. And so we went over to deliver some food to them the next day and just to check up on them. And when we walked into their house, it was not only dark, like the lights were off, but there was like just a heaviness in that home. I mean, it was just the home of mourning. Yeah. And so I said, hey, did you hear what happened last night? And he's like, no, I didn't hear anything. And so we told him the story, and he got to laughing so hard that he was bent over his dining room table, just laughing at the idea of us getting arrested here, And so I think the Lord used it as something to kind of, bring some laughter and joy back into a home that was mourning, and
break the tension a little bit.
It did. Yeah. Yeah. And I'd say the second thing that came out of that was, Samuel always said, if not us, then who? Like we own a business. We've got savings. We don't have to answer to anybody. Like, how can we tell other people to stand up if we're just going to, fool at some shrew telling us to put a mask on? It's like, no, you got to encourage the boys. This is for everybody. This is living it.
I think this would be a good time to share the picture because I would love to have the context on this. So,
sure.
Are you seeing it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, there it is.
So describe what's happening for those that are just listening.
Yeah. So we got our court date, and Samuel and I had two different judges, two different prosecutors. Samuel's prosecutor was a young black woman who was looking to right some historical wrongs, and so she really tried to throw the book at Sam. He got like a year of probation. He got a big fine. Like it was a whole deal. So with me, I got like a middle-aged white dude. He was okay. And I had a Zoom trial. And so I had that sign sitting behind me during my Zoom trial. So Zoom pops up. The judge is like squinting, trying to read it. He starts laughing. The prosecutor didn't think it was super funny. But so I got off with, I think, a $50 fine and 2 days in jail. But because I was arrested at 11:30 and I got out at like 2 a.m., they considered that 2 days. So neither of us had to go back to jail. I like that math.
Yeah. Pulling some funny numbers there. Yeah.
Yeah. All my black friends keep calling me Mr. Didn't Do Nothing. Like, yeah, I'll take it, man.
Yeah. So what was Samuel's upshot? Did he did it come out differently for him?
Yeah, so I got, I think, a $50 fine and 2 days in jail. Sam got 2 days in jail, a year of probation, and a $600 fine.
Whoa.
So,
yeah.
In that year, his next child was born at that same hospital, and they tried to make him put a mask on again. And it was very close to me having to bail him out of jail.
Yeah.
He stood his ground. He refused to put a mask on.
Fantastic. Yeah.
They sent some like limp-wristed gay dude and a woman over to tell him to put a mask on, and Sam's like, "Buddy, they sent the wrong crew. Like, this is not going to happen."
Yeah. Next time, send Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, you better.
Yeah.
Is he still around? Does he want to hop on and say hi real quick? Or
I can hear him over there, but I think he's putting his kids to bed.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
Just curious.
I'll text him if he gets free. I'll tell him to come in.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, speaking of being a, you have a sort of invulnerability to the specific thing that not only do the tyrants in our government want to go after people for, but pastors, specifically the CREC variety of pastors, like to go after people in congregations.
Yeah.
Because of your business, you have that kind of invulnerability to that specific kind of attack, and you have leveraged that into becoming one of the leading meme kings that we have. You've kind of led the battle with this account, specifically on Twix or Twitter or X or whatever we want to call it. Tell us about that, because you've had some very high profile skirmishes, and it's been an absolute blast watching it from the outside. So tell us what's going on from the inside.
Yeah. So the invulnerability from a business perspective has been very helpful. So I don't have to worry about losing a job. I don't have to worry about losing a client or a customer or anything like that. Our main money comes from investing, and so that has provided a lot of help. And then we talked a little bit about this before we went on air about even, I'm a part of a denomination that would likely come after me for this kind of stuff. Politically, we are not aligned, but I have a good local church that has protected me quite a bit from this. And so There have been multiple people. The most recent was a CREC guy. He's part of the Greyfriars Hall, that kind of seminary type thing they do up in Moscow.
Okay.
He got upset with me because I told him that he was a snake and other stuff, and so he went and he started emailing my pastor and trying to make trouble for me here. We've had other people that have called or emailed or even texted my pastor to try to get me in trouble for things. And I'll just say this, like my pastor and my elders are not in agreement with me on a lot of things. Like they will argue with me when they think I'm wrong on something. I posted something making fun of Abraham Lincoln a couple months ago, and my pastor is a Abraham Lincoln fan.
Mm-hmm.
And so we argued about those things. But my pastor's not a dork like these CREC pastors. He doesn't go, oh, okay, well, because you think that Abraham Lincoln was wrong and in sin or whatever, you're going to be excommunicated from the church.
Yeah.
So he has defended me against all comers, basically, while still saying, like, hey, remember that you represent our church. Remember, because I do hold a position in the church. Remember that, don't go on there and be a bully. Don't go on there and be needlessly chaotic or quarrelsome. Otherwise, have fun, And I think my pastor gets a lot of that attitude because he's a big Luther fan. So he's like, he's down for it.
Right.
But having the insulation of a good church is very, very important, even within a denomination that maybe is not so good on those things, or a presbytery, or in my case, a classis that is not so good on those things. Having a good pastor and a good group of elders who are not dorks and they're not wimps, you can be protected quite a bit from those things. But it has caused skirmishes. People have reached out to I had one white knight who tried to reach out to every woman in my family, wife, sister, mom, sisters-in-law, anybody with the same last name, to say, this guy's really dangerous. You have to be careful. If he's holding you hostage, blink twice. It was that kind of thing. We've had people who have tried to, who've tried to do a bunch of research to find out who my boss is or who Samuel's boss is. I'm like, you're just going to get my phone number. But
yeah, Samuel's boss is Ethan and Ethan's boss is Samuel. What are you going to do?
Yeah. we both have based bosses. So we've had quite a bit of that. And again, you're insulated by having your own income stream, and you're insulated by having a solid church of men you can trust.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, that is a real problem right now. I mean, we all know people who literally got fired for things that they have said on Twitter, because the things that they said, on Facebook, Twitter, what have you, on the internet, things that, at most, if you're upset with these people, it's fisticuffs, at most.
Right.
These are not, civilization-ending statements.
Right.
Saying that our government's doing this wrong, and our local community is out of whack in this way or that way, and literally destroying people's livelihoods, putting them in jeopardy because you don't like something he said. He said something mean and he hurt my feelings, and it sounds very immature, and it is very immature, but.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we live in a society where those kinds of threats, where people say, I'm going to ruin you, they really can. And so there are a lot of guys online who are hiding behind, and, they might take issue with me saying it, but they're literally hiding behind the cloak of anonymity.
Yeah.
And a lot of people like to disrespect them for that. Well, if you really believed it, you would show your face.
Right.
What's your pastor's name? What church do you go to? Tell me right now, or else I won't. You're arguing with me, and you're just a liar because you won't tell me your real name.
Yeah.
And the example that a lot of people bring up, and I think it's a very apropos one, is the Federalist Papers. Our founding fathers who built this nation, they did it anonymity behind the cloak of anonymity, because they would literally be hanged.
Yes.
If the King's Guards knew who they were, they would come, they would be arrested, they would be hanged for treason. And, it's a high-tech lynching, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's the same kind of thing. If you speak out, we're going to find you. We're going to find who your friends are. We're going to find who your family are. We're going to make you
Yep.
unemployable. And, friends of ours have really
Yeah.
struggled to get a job. At, you know, uh, Doug Wilson, in one of his articles about this, he says, if he ends up being a driver for
FedEx
FedEx,
worker.
if he ends
Yeah.
up being a driver for FedEx, no real harm has been done in the world.
Yeah.
And a friend of ours that this happened to went to not FedEx, but the competition, but the other big package company to get a job. And people found out he was applying there, called them and said, "Hey, don't hire him. He said these things on the internet," and then he got dropped.
Yep. Yep.
So it's not just that, well, we don't want him teaching in a church, or we don't want him teaching in a school, or we don't want him having a position of authority. They want you dead.
Yep.
They want your children raped and murdered. These people exist. They have names and addresses. They are real, and they're a real threat. And
Yes.
they want to destroy you, and you can't bargain with that. And there's a reason.
That's right.
These people are going behind anonymous names. And so it is, I mean, you talk about you're isolated from some of the fallout of that, but even in your position, it still is a brave thing to stand up and to put your name to it, and to say, no, here's my position. Unless I am convinced by scripture or right reason, I cannot recant. Here I stand, I can do no other. To make that statement is a strong thing. And we do appreciate people like you and Samuel who are going to put their face on it and say, look, we'll be the vanguard. We'll go out there and we'll say it, and we'll take the slings and arrows of great misfortune. We will absorb it for the rest of y'all.
Yeah, and that's kind of our goal. Sam and I talk about this quite a bit because we have a lot of good, faithful brothers who, if they did what we did, would be completely ruined, maybe for the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least in this time of their life that is so foundational to setting up a future. And so it's like, why not? Why not? We're set up in a way that it would be tough to come after us. We can handle it. We have, even if they were able to rob us of our investments or something like that, we have a good family and a friend base, a good church. Like, we can recover a lot quicker than a lot of these guys could. And to kind of go back to what you were saying about the digital lynching, I can't go into a ton of detail because I know a lot of it has not been talked about yet. But it's like going to this fight with Ogden and Moscow. Mine and Samuel's name was a big part of that fight, and because of what happened during all of that, they found out that my best friend is a member of a CREC church. And because of that, they started to put pressure on him. Hey, what is this about this? I heard that you're friends with this guy, and I want you to set up a meeting with him so I can go over and talk to him and all of these things. And I think you guys probably know this, but I made a rule. I do not meet with CREC men unless I know them personally. Because of exactly this, so they kind of put pressure on one of my friends. They kind of, some of them began to try to argue with him and engage and try to make him defend me over at his CREC church. I was talked about from CREC leadership down to the local church in a big meeting about keep an eye out for this guy and his brother Samuel. And honestly, I think Samuel has become much more of a problem to them than I have. It kind of started off with they were after me, and then
there's an infamous video on the internet you can find.
Yeah, there's a handful.
More than one.
There's more than one. Yeah.
And that's why, even yesterday, I woke up to Doug Wilson commenting on my post. That's why we've gotten under his skin, and after some of the behind the scenes meetings that we have got to hear about, we are quite far under his skin, and he's. Because of that, other CREC people have heard, oh, Doug doesn't like this, so we better pursue this too. So I get these dorks coming out of Greyfriars Hall and Moscow and King's Congregation, King's Cross, and all of these different churches from all over writing me and trying to rebuke me and trying to reach out to my pastor and trying to get Sam to explain why this image was in this video and this was over here and just trying to turn the heat up on us, even at a local level, to the point where I have now granted, some of the CREC folks who asked to meet with me have a good relationship with my friend. They're not, to my knowledge, like snakes and vipers and that kind of stuff. But it is still a denomination I'm not a part of, a church I'm not a part of, reaching out and trying to exercise some sort of authority over Samuel and I. And we saw this with the Joel Webben and Tobias Rimmenschneider thing. We're seeing it now with, Eli McGowan, whatever his name is, going after Joel Webben. There's this kind of, we will cross any and every barrier. We can't let the local churches handle this. We will cross any and every barrier to destroy these men because they are to the right of us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a real threat to guys like Doug Wilson, whose entire persona, his entire kingdom is built off of, I'm the furthest guy to the right, and everyone's scared of me, and sometimes I take pictures with cigarettes, and like that's his whole thing. Like, and so when someone outdoes him and does it in a cooler and younger and just reaching more people kind of way, it just of course it's gonna get under his skin because that's all he has. So to be outdone in the one thing you have is just
and I think what this comes from is and this is not unique to CREC, unfortunately. This is something that we've seen throughout history. I mean, during the Reformation, this whole kind of attitude of churches and pastors attacking each other happened at that time as well. Sometimes the focus gets away from the local church and it gets a focus onto brand. We have brand, and we have, this name that we're trying to uphold. And if you get somebody out there who's, loosely affiliated with you and he's doing some things that kind of make you a little bit embarrassed, well, that threatens my brand. And my brand, I mean, and while I disagree with them quite strongly, I mean, I do have some understanding of where they're coming from because their brand is their livelihood. Mm-hmm. It's like Elon Musk in his interview with Joe Rogan, he was talking about, when he's cutting the spending with Doge, what he was planning on doing. He's like, if we cut too much, somebody somewhere is going to lose his livelihood. It's going to mean that his kids can't go to a private school anymore. It's going to mean that he loses his house that he's got a mortgage on. And those kind of people are going to get up in arms, literally, and possibly try to literally kill him because you're taking food out of his mouth. Now, you can rightly argue, but the only reason you have that food on your table, the only reason you live the way you do is because of injustice that you're doing against the American taxpayer. But at the end of the day, it still is, you are fighting him on his own home front. And that's what's going on with a lot of these brand people. They've got a mission that they're trying to accomplish. They're making money. They're making their livelihood off of it. It's not a hobby. It is their job. And if you come out and you get more popular than them, or if you say things that make you seem like you're the new radical right as opposed to them, well, now they have a real threat to their person. I have sympathy, but at the same time, I can have sympathy and look at it and say, look, I understand why you feel this way. I understand why you feel this way, but it doesn't make what you're doing right. Your behavior in this way is bad. Your behavior is wrong. What you're doing is injustice to your fellow man and to your brother in Christ. And you need to stop it. Even, the Proverbs talks about, the man who swears to his own hurt and changes not. If you're doing something good, even if it hurts you, you need to not lash out in anger and seek to harm your fellow brother.
Yep. No, it's the funny thing is the Jolly Brawler account is named after Doug Wilson. Mm-hmm. That's I always considered him to be a Jolly Brawler, and so that's where I came up with it. And it was always a goal. It wasn't a description of me. It was something that I wanted to aspire to be a happy fighter, and so I've always had a deep appreciation for Doug for years. And I think this is. Did we lose Jeffrey?
It looks like he's still there.
I'm back.
Oh, there we go. This is where Doug is making his misstep. And you almost hate to tell your enemy how to fix their problems, but I'm going to. he's used to fighting everybody to his left. And this goes for James White too. They're used to fighting people to their left. They think that if they just fight the same way that they fought the woke, the emergent church, the evangelicals and Catholics together, if they just fight the same way that they fought all of these other guys, they're going to win. If they do that and batten down the hatches for a couple of years, they will emerge. They'll still be there being the faithful preachers, and this whole Christian nationalism thing, right wing, it's all going to be gone. Well, the problem is these guys have never had to fight to their right before, and that's what they're encountering. They're encountering people going, hey, if you look at a long line from Christ down to us, there's one generation that stepped out of that line in all of these views, whether it has to do with race or sexuality or whatever. There's one generation that stepped out of that continuing line all the way down. And now you're demanding that we step into line with you and forsake our fathers. And for the first time, you have a younger generation who is further to the right than the older generation. And they're saying, no, we're not going to follow you. We are going to go back to the fathers, go back to the sources, go back to the apostles. And so the more that they fight and treat us like we are leftists, the more they are losing. And, I was just talking to a young man from Moscow yesterday, and he was saying, hey, the church is losing up here. The church, they think that they're stomping out the right wing. He goes, but everybody who's younger than me is further to the right than me. It's moving one way, and the church leadership is not keeping up with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they continue to want to fight like this is a passing fad and like we're leftists, instead of calling them back to what every Christian has believed about this stuff for the last 2,000 years.
Yeah, that got brought up in the when we had Thomas Acord on.
Okay.
And the I know you have the Who Is My Neighbor book behind you. The subtitle on that is something like things everyone believed until yesterday, and like now everyone's forgotten it. Like it was like and so like that's the like that really is what's going on. Is that we found that just like you said, one generation ago, everything was just thrown out the window.
Right.
And we're like, well, hey, let's go out and pick that stuff back up and bring it inside. Like,
mm-hmm.
Well, you're in that kind of unenviable position that I can't remember if it was Knox or Rutherford who said, if a father loses his mind, the way that his son can honor him is by restraining. If a father loses his mind, he's going to burn down his house. The way that his son honors him is not by allowing him to go and burn down the house, but by restraining him until his right senses come back. And that's an unenviable position. And it's the position that our generation is in, because we look back to a generation that even the best of them, and I really would probably consider Doug one of the best of them on the cultural issues. And he's awful. He's awful on the cultural issues. And so you have a younger generation trying to restrain and saying, hey, what about when Paul said this? What about when Augustine or Chrysostom or Luther said this? And they're not interested because they have an underlying presupposition of liberalism, capital L, and they are not. The thing about presuppositions is you don't examine presuppositions. You just presuppose them. And that's the problem. You can't get them to look at this underlying thing. And so they think that you're some radical woke right or whatever the nonsense is. When really they're just 60s children, and that's all it is.
One of these days we need to do an episode on what woke actually means, because if you actually go back, so I'm old enough to where I remember when woke was it was a positive term.
Mm-hmm, sure.
Like that's what it was used for. And I mean, growing up in California, you know, I knew people who said that unironically. And somewhere around the time that woke church book came out, everyone flipped the switch, and now it's a bad thing. And which it is, but I mean, it like people aren't understanding what it means, because if you really understood what woke is supposed to mean, you would never even come up with this crazy concept of the woke right. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So one of these days we'll have to.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll go ahead and ruin our next show on the woke right, but I mean, James Lindsay is the guy who Yeah, Old Bemley says Ethan and Samuel are the coolest guys ever. Concur.
I appreciate it,
Y'all are
guys.
pretty awesome. You know, the guy who's trying to popularize and say, oh well, the right wing is just woke right. If you look at what woke means, and then you look at what woke right by just drawing out conclusions, what that would mean, it's kind of like neoconservative. Neoconservatives are not
Yeah.
conservatives. They're the
Right.
people who joined the conservative movement because of Ronald Reagan, and they're leftists who wanted to take hold of the apparatus of the conservative machinery, and did, and drove the conservative movement leftward.
Yeah.
And woke right is the exact same thing. It's the people who are joining the conservative movement because of Donald Trump. He's done a lot of good things, but he is woke right. He
Sure.
believes in gay mirage. He's all in the sodomite agenda. But, trans is too far. Transvestites in women, in girls' sports and in women's locker rooms, that's too far. But we're okay with this and we're okay with that. But you can't go, that is woke right.
Yes.
The James Lindsay is woke right because he's not a real conservative. He's not a real right winger. He is woke, but he is identifying himself as right because that gives him the most cachet. Because right now the right wing is in it is growing. It's where the power is. So just turn that on its head. But
well, I think the way that they use woke right. So when they use it for people like us, which is a misuse of it. But I think what's happening here is they look at some of the stuff that we talk about when it comes to race or sexuality, and the conservatives don't believe in race, and so they look and they go, "Hey, the woke people, they believe in race. They believe black people should have their own graduations and stuff like that. And these right wing people, they believe in race." And so they're both just woke. And so they're woke on opposite ends of the spectrum. And really all they're seeing is illiberalism. You have two groups who are not liberal. Everything in between. If you take liberalism as something from kind of left-wing Democrat to Buckley conservative to libertarian, and you have these two things, the communists who are woke and the right-wing people over here who do not fit on that spectrum at all, they just look at this thing and go, oh, they're both woke because it's illiberal. They don't know how to categorize it because all they can think about is they can only think within liberal categories. That's I think one of the big problems.
Yeah. It's kind of like, when you read the Communist Manifesto, which I did for college, and I kept my copy of it because I thought it was such an interesting book. You read the first part of each section and, he's saying a lot of true things. He's like, capitalism has caused, people to pursue money instead of their fellow man. It's like, as a Christian, I can observe that. I can believe it's true. And he says, and the solution is communism. Right. And the solution is, rampant authoritarianism. And the solution is, this idea that material is the solution to all of our problems. And it's like, you can in worldly wisdom, you can, and I'll just keep talking because it looks like we dropped him. But
looks like he's still here.
You can diagnose real problems. But that doesn't mean you're going to have the right solutions to those problems.
Right.
And Karl Marx is a very interesting example of this. He's a guy who looked at the world around him, saw a lot of things that were wrong, and correctly realized they were wrong. And then his prescription for them was worse than the problem itself.
That's right. Yeah.
And people look at us and they're like, well, James Lindsay's famous for this. He put out a piece the other day that was endorsed by Christian nationalists. And it was, I took the Communist Manifesto and then I changed all the words. And then they agreed with it, which means they agreed with the Communist Manifesto. It's like,
right.
Yeah, I mean, if I take the instructions for how to skin a chicken, and then I change all the words into, how to build a house, and then you say, yeah, that's how you build a house. And I go, well, actually, that's the instructions to skin a chicken. You changed all the words.
You're right.
Functionally, it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
But, when you have somebody who correctly identifies problems and then prescribes arsenic,
the worst medication,
for the solution, that doesn't mean that his identification of the problems was wrong. Right. It means that his idea of how to solve the problem was wrong.
Right.
So, you get a lot of people looking at us, guys on the right who are very far right wing, very, conservative in a very old fashioned way. And they say, well, you're saying the exact same thing about, all of these pertinent issues to our society right now, nationalism. You're saying the same things about nationalism that mid-century Europeans were saying about nationalism. Ergo, you're a Nazi or you're a fascist. It's like, well,
Right.
just because I've identified the same problems doesn't mean I prescribe the same solution. I don't want an overbearing fascist state. I don't want a national socialist state. But that doesn't mean that the nationalist socialists weren't wrong about communism in
Right.
1930s Germany.
Yeah.
So two things can be true at once.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
I'm sorry. I had a conversation with my wife last night. We were watching that show Black Mirror, and I don't know if either of you watch it.
I haven't.
Every once in a while, it's a pretty good show. It's not episodic, so it's like each show is its own thing. It's like our generation's Twilight Zone. Anyways,
Okay.
So I'm watching it, and the premise was that it was the 1970s in England, and there was this Indian woman, and like the bad guys were the ones who were like, hey, I'm tired of Indian culture being around me because like your food stinks and you kind of stink and
There's litter everywhere.
And it's taking place in the 70s, right? And then there's like the guy who's like the ultimate bad guy of this episode, and he's a politician who's like, I would like to preserve our culture as Englishmen, like that. And the conversation I was having,
Rivers of blood,
was because I'd watched a YouTube video earlier in the week where the guy was saying like the difference between how we write good guys and bad guys has changed dramatically, because in the Christian worldview, and this comes from Aristotle. Sorry, big ego types that don't like that, but the idea is that you are, it's the virtue ethics idea. You are what you do. Mm-hmm. It's not like, oh, I'm a good guy, but I do bad things. It's like, well, what makes you good? Where would I find that goodness in you if all that comes out of you is bad things? And so we've taken that, where it's like character development is like starting, you start off doing bad things and now you do good things, and now you become a good person. Now, with, like woke literature, it's you're the bad guy because you're the white guy.
Yeah.
And so there is no character development. You're just, and there is no, there's no virtue.
There's no redemption arc.
Yeah, there's nothing. Right. You're the bad guy because you're the white guy, and they're the good guy because they are, their ancestors, whatever amount of years ago, were oppressed, or they were oppressed, or whatever. And it doesn't matter why they were oppressed. This guy's the good guy because he came out of apartheid in South Africa, as if the people who came up with apartheid were just like, I don't know, let's just have our own thing for no reason, and there's no reason to fence them off. And so that was what made me think of that, was just this idea of we are the bad guys because we're the white guys who don't hate being white. That's it. That's the end of it. That's why we're the bad guys.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's one of those things, even talking about race, it's always a temptation to go, I get called a kinist. I've been called a kinist like 10 times this week, literally. And it's one of those things where just being white and talking about race is very inflammatory to everybody, even if you're just saying the same things everyone has always believed in. And of course, it's always tempting to be like, I'm married to like a very dark brown skinned woman, right? It's like half the people I love in this world are brown skinned because I married into a Chamorro family. And, but it is one of those things that, you are automatically to be discounted at best discounted, if not vilified. For speaking about any of these things. And kind of touching back on what Jeff was saying earlier about, Marx, finding these real problems. Capitalism has made you care more about these things than people. That was actually a conversation that Samuel and I had early on when we started this company. So much of what we do is based off of the book The Search for God in Guinness. I don't know if you've ever read that, but it's a story of Arthur Guinness starting the Guinness Beer Company.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, Guinness continues to be one of the biggest employers in Ireland. And I think they've gone gay on a lot of stuff. And they're not, so their founder was a Presbyterian, post-mill guy, thought 1,000 years in advance. I mean, was just a good dude. But we looked at the same problem and said, hey, we want to make money. We want to provide for our families. We want to be, we don't want to have strings attached to us and all of this. But we also, so we started this company before Samuel was a Christian. I'd only been a Christian for like 3 years. Samuel wasn't a Christian yet. And I remember talking with him early on and saying, listen, I know you're not a Christian, but a founding principle in this rule is that we have to treat people as though they're made in the image of God. And I need you to be able to get on board with that. And he was on board with it. Then we read The Search for God in Guinness and saw how Guinness treated the people who worked for him and the people who relied on him. And the answer wasn't to, keep as much money back from them as possible. He did things like he built houses for them that still 200 years later are still standing and have no, they won't be falling anytime soon. He hired masseuses and chiropractors to come to the factory for these hardworking men and keep them well adjusted. And they started a training program to train their wives how to cook, how to clean, how to do things so that when these hardworking men went home, they were cared for. And there's so much of how we approach our company that is because of Guinness and our forefathers who didn't see capitalism as a religion that must be obeyed and followed to the letter of the law and all of that, but cared much more about community and things like that. And so again, yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen the Man Rampant episode with Wilson interviewing Alan Carlson. He's talking about something very similarly. Carlson is. And Wilson goes, yeah, that just sounds communist. And Carlson just looked at Wilson and goes, yeah, I don't care. I don't care if it sounds communist. I care what's best for the people in America.
Perfect.
Yeah, it was a great
response.
answer. And Samuel and I have tried to approach things like that. And so we do things like we cook up 100 dozen cookies every year and go deliver it out to all of our tenants and then another several dozen out to all the vendors. We try to set things up so that we could give people discounts during December on their rent, particular tenants, so that they can afford
Christmas,
Christmas
things. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so it's like we want to make money, we want to take care of our families, but we also want to honor God and show that this is not a one-sided deal. This isn't greedy landlords coming in and swiping stuff up, and there is a godly way to conduct business, and capitalism does not hold all of the answers to that.
I had heard the story that Arthur Guinness wanted Irish people to not be as drunk.
Right.
And so he made a filling beer so that they couldn't drink as much of it.
Right. So basically, some people say it's a myth, some people say it's true, but basically he was walking through Ireland and just said like whiskey is destroying my nation. And so I want to make a beer that is strong. So he made the stout, but won't deplete you like it's depleting these men. And so he created the stout that we still drink today.
Yeah.
Again, it's not communist to care about your community, even though those words have the same root. It's not communist to say, hey, this is where I live. This is where I'm invested. I want these people to benefit from being associated with me.
Yeah.
And there's lots of things that we do, like we do for our tenants to try to communicate to them that they're important, and as long as they're with us, they get preference. It's the Ordo Amoris again, in a broader way for us. It's saying, hey, if a 2-bedroom apartment opens up and I have a family that needs a 2-bedroom apartment, even though it costs me way more money to move them from here to here, because now I have another open apartment, I got to go in there and do all the repairs, it's going to sit on the market, all of that. it's better for these people. And because they have trusted us as their landlords and because they've been faithful tenants, we are going to be faithful to them and we're going to move them over here, even if it hurts the bottom line.
Yeah.
There's things like this that you do as Christian businessmen to show the love of Christ. And because of our business practices, we have been able to point many people to Christ. There are people that are going to church today because of their relationship to Samuel and myself. And there are people who own homes today because one of the things that we try to do is guide people through buying their first house so they're not permanent renters. And we link them up with our realtor, which we think is the greatest realtor in Idaho. We link them up with our lenders, who we think are the greatest lenders in Idaho. And we know they're going to hand walk them through things. We answer any of their questions. We'll go look at the house for them. We'll tell them how to make it profitable. I mean, we do anything that we can for those who are within our group, even if it costs us money, because capitalism is not my religion.
Yeah. Yeah. And, people will hear these things that you're doing. And they'll say, well, you're not giving the fullest payout to your investors, like the Dodge brothers when they sued Ford. Yeah. It's like your duty is to the shareholders. It's like, well, there is this concept, and it predates communism, called noblesse oblige. And, I've talked to my brother about this as my brother and I are trying to handle, rental properties that my dad owns. He lives out of state, and it's not, the way that we manage our properties is not super profitable because my dad's idea for why he bought property is so that his kids can own homes.
Yes.
So the way that we have it structured is, okay, I've got this house over here. That's for my first kid. I have this house over here. That's for my second kid. I have this house over here. And that's our inheritance. In the meantime, he's making rental off of it. Mm-hmm. But because his priority is not, I want to make a killing, our behavior is very different. And I talked to my brother about this. If you're going to be, as it were, a landed gentry, a nobleman, you have an obligation to the people that are under your sway.
That's right. That's right.
Noblesse oblige is an ancient idea that predates communism. It goes back to feudalism. People depend on you. They live in that house. That house needs to work for them because their family's in it. And you have a duty to the people who are paying you money to provide them with shelter.
That's right.
And it also extends beyond that. I mean, we have a renter of sorts who had a horse that was colicky one night. And, she called my brother and I. We used to work at a horse ranch when we were teenagers. And, she's like, I've got this horse and I don't know what's going on. And I think she's going to die. And, she's hysterical. And of course she would be. I mean, this is not only is this monetarily a valuable animal, but this is her baby, right?
Yeah.
She loves this creature. And she calls us and we show up and we're walking it around and we're trying to get it to drink water. And then, we get a shot into her and she starts getting better. So we go home at 2 a.m. And then the next morning we're up and going to work. Yeah. It's right. That sucks. But you know what? It was an obligation that we had to somebody who was under our, as it were, in our domain. She's our people. And she called us because she didn't have anybody else to call. And we showed up and we took care of her. And you know what? That's something you can't buy. Right. And that's something that most people don't have. And it's not communism. It's not communism to care about the people that you are responsible for in some fashion.
That's right. Well, it's like a couple of things. Like sometimes it can be just the smallest thing. Like we'll have tenants who are moving and they have just a little hatchback car. So there's been many times Sam and I just went and dropped the truck off, gave them the keys, go use it to get moved. Famous, I guess maybe infamously, there's only about 10 people on earth who can call me. If you call me, it goes straight to voicemail. And that's on purpose because I get about between 1 and 200 phone calls a day. So anybody who I would be their emergency contact, they can call me. So my cousin that night that he lost his child, he can call me. My wife, my parents, my brother, my sister-in-law, my daughter, a couple of my siblings, not all of my siblings. But also, and I just get roasted for this on Facebook, those people, and then every single jail in any county that I have property in can call me, because I know that I have good tenants who have had trouble with the law or are cleaning their lives up. You and I we were talking about my fun redneck tenant before we went on air. Many times they get arrested and they call me to let me know, hey, I'm going to be in jail for 30 days. I don't have the rent. I can't make the rent payment. And I could try to work something out with them to hold their apartment open for them until they get out. But many times we go, okay, what's the bail? It's $500. Okay, we'll come down to the jail and pay $500 to get you out. And then you could go back to working and doing those things. We have bailed several of our tenants out. We had a tenant that actually got extradited all the way to Georgia.
Oh, goodness.
We helped get him bailed out, wrote letters to the judge, did all kinds of stuff. And that guy is still renting from us 6-7 years later. And again, it's not so that he will continue to rent from us. I'm not doing it utilitarian. I believe business should be run this way. And so that's how we run it.
Yeah.
And again, having a good partner like Samuel always helps in this. A lot of partners would put their foot down in this, and Sam has never fought back, and often is also out there doing this kind of stuff.
I think a lot of people listening are going to say, well, of course everyone believes that, right? Because it's so obvious, right? Everyone believes that. I know guys who advocate very strongly against what we're talking about right now.
Right.
The guys with the new Christian intellectual thing.
That's exactly what popped in my mind.
Yeah, those guys specifically. So I used to be pretty close friends with Jacob Brunton. We went to the same church, and like I stuck up for him at his getting kicked out of church trial, whatever. Anyways, I remember one time we were sitting at this snow cone place. He was like, "Oh, this snow cone place is so good, right?" And we're all like sitting there, and it's his wife and my wife and the two of us. And he was, we're sitting there eating snow cones. And I was like, well, yeah, I know how important it is for you to support local businesses. And his wife started laughing because she knows he hates that idea of supporting local businesses, because the most moral thing you can do in a business transaction from the capitalist perspective,
the Randian ideal.
You're gonna take as much from somebody as you can, so that you can have as much as you can get a hold of. That's it. It's literally the game of Monopoly. Like when that game was created, the purpose of it was to show the end game of capitalism. Is just to screw people. The guy that made that game said that.
Really?
Like it was, like he was on record as saying like it was kind of a joke. Like there's not really an end game until I guess everyone loses their money, and except one guy owns everything.
And one guy ends up with everything. And that is the idea of capitalism is, I'm going to stick knives into as many people as I can. I'm going to make you mortgage your properties to pay rent so that I can buy up your mortgaged properties at pennies on the dollar. I'm going to trade you your rent for this property over there so that I can accumulate wealth. And it is not Christian.
That's right.
It is absolutely not Christian.
And just to show that I don't have Wilson derangement syndrome, as I get accused of for going after him, Wilson talks about this a little bit and says, if you find out that your Christian brother owns an automotive shop, you don't go in there and say, hey, can I get a 10% discount? We're brothers. Instead, how about you pay him 10% more because he's a Christian? How about you be a blessing instead of asking for things from him? How about you go above and beyond for the people in your community? And I think that's a good principle. And going back to what you're talking about Randian ideals and everything, there's I don't know which episode it is, but the King's Hall podcast. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, but I caught theirs, and they did one on Leinenkugels, the beer. And if you get a chance to watch that introduction, watch it. But it's talking about exactly this, what the Leinenkugels family did for their community. and how it lasted all of this time until they were purchased, I think, by Anheuser-Busch.
Mm-hmm.
And then Anheuser-Busch stripped it down for parts, robbed it of its soul, and left that entire town desolate.
Yeah, and now the town is completely imploded.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Mm-hmm.
there's a better way to do things. And, you know, my first order of business is taking care of my wife and child. My second order of business is making sure that Samuel and his family are taken care of. We're in business together. After that, my tenants get taken care of no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
So that's our job as Christians.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
speaking of,
the example that you used, you know, where you said, you know, we have renters and they need to move out or move in,
Yeah.
and I just drop off my truck. There's a moment in toward the end of Atlas Shrugged, where, like, you know, the slut girl who's the protagonist discovers the all white enclave of Ubermensch in the mountains that's disguised from the outside world. You know, the little white
Right.
Wakanda thing. And, you know, this one guy wants to borrow someone else's car to take her on a date because she's evidently so perfect that, you know, that every guy wants her.
Yeah.
And, you know, he stands on his principles of paying to borrow a car to take a girl on a date.
Sure.
And it's like, I would never charge my friend money to borrow my car to take a girl on a date.
Right.
That is offensive to me.
It is.
But to her mindset, to her Judeo-Christian mindset, you have to charge money or else somehow you're getting cheated. And the ideal is, you know, I will never demand that another man sacrifice himself for me, and I will never sacrifice myself for my fellow man.
Yeah.
It is satanic. It is literally satanic.
It robs you. You will never meet people who think like that. And this is the new Christian intellectual people. They will never be described as magnanimous people. They will never rise to being magnanimous. They will never be big. They will never be giving. They will never be charitable and kind and pillars. They will always be kind of transactionists all the way down to the pit.
Which is absolutely crazy, because the night that I brought my daughter home from the hospital, Jacob Brunton was there with like a huge lasagna that night. Didn't charge me for it. None of that. Right?
That's what I was gonna ask. Did you get a bill?
Yeah, he was just there
Yeah.
with free food and unprompted, right? Great gesture. Clearly that's not consistent with something Ayn Rand would ever do.
Well,
Yeah,
and, you know, Doug Wilson talks about, you know, the blessed, or maybe it's James White talks about the blessed inconsistencies when he's talking about people like Catholics, where it's like, yeah, well, if you believe everything the Catholic Church teaches, you will go to hell, because it is a satanic religion. You know, you are replacing Christ with Mary. You're replacing God the Father with the Pope. But the thing is,
and the Holy Spirit with the priest, the vicar.
Yeah, but how many Catholics do you actually know who literally believe that? I mean, I know lots of Catholics who are just like, oh yeah, the Pope, he's an absolute cad.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you're Catholic. You can't believe that. Well, they do. But there's these blessed inconsistencies where somebody who is a friend will have these high-minded, retarded ideals of, oh, you know, I will never sacrifice myself for my fellow man. But if your house is on fire and your child's in that fire, he's going to run in and get your child, and he's not going to give you a bill at the end of it. Right. And you know, that's God's grace in their life, because the thing that they believe is stupid, and the thing that they purport to believe and command that, you know, if you don't believe this, you're a communist. Those things are not the way they live their life in reality. It's a LARP. And it's not a good LARP. It's a stupid one. And it's very annoying.
It is. It is. And, you know, not to tie everything back to business again, but this is why, if you are going to go into partnership with somebody, you know, it's like Samuel is a great partner because he not only supports these kinds of ideas, but he has these ideas himself and wants to be a magnanimous company. He wants to be giving, and, you know, that, I think it comes with being right wing. You want your community to flourish. Mm-hmm. And so having that for yourself as a businessman, you need to have that. And if you're somebody who's going to go into a partnership, which can be a very complicated thing, you want to make sure that your partner has those same views, because otherwise it will cause nonstop trouble.
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure.
Speaking of being supportive, I always appreciate that you not only buy my books every time one comes out, but you send me a picture that you bought them. So
I think I got your other one over here. Let me see.
Yeah, you got them both up there.
There you go.
On each side of John Calvin. And what is that? Matthew Henry commentary?
Those are Spurgeon sermons.
Spurgeon sermon. Okay, that was good.
See,
I swear
the Presbyterians, they like giving us a hard time because we like their Presbyterian theologians. But anytime you talk about sermons, up comes Spurgeon, and y'all are fans of him too. So.
Oh, I love him. Even with all the flowery language and everything, I love him.
Yeah.
So you've got Who Is My Neighbor? Obviously, is that the C.R. Wiley book on your other end?
So that's Haunted Cosmos by Brian Sobey.
Okay.
And then back there is Zachary Garris's book, Honor Thy Fathers.
Okay.
And then this is just my office. My bookcase is out in the living room. And I try to buy every book that any friend publishes, writes, anything like that.
That's cool.
All right. Well,
that's yeah, it's a and eventually I will get around to reading all of them.
Yeah.
So
I have a good friend and mentor who has a bookshelf in his living room with literally thousands of books. His son is a carpenter, brilliant carpenter, and just an absolute swole king at that. And he made this custom bookshelf with like a ladder and a sliding ladder so you can get to all these books. And he said, people will come in and see all these thousands upon thousands of books, and they'll ask him, "Have you read all these books?" And he says, "Some of them I've read more than once." But he says, he's kind of burying the lead there because it's like, I've not read all of them.
I have a pretty good so I sort my bookcase by the last name of the author, and I start at A and go to Z for all of the books that I've read, and then A to Z for all the books I haven't read. And so there's a clear break in my books. And so
you are definitely on the spectrum.
Dude, I know. But I'll say this. I have like 6 shelves, and 5 of them, I've read all of them. And I think there's only 1 or maybe 2, 1.5 maybe, that I have not read. So,
yeah. Well, I mean,
that would drive me nuts.
Really changed the game,
That would drive me nuts, the alphabetical, because I need to know the topical. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know right here, I've got like, this is all Civil War right here-ish. Okay. And then this is all, I've got some, these are the books that I wanted to be seen over my shoulder. Most of them are theology books. That's kind of what I was going for.
Yeah.
So like I've got my topics. I can't imagine doing alphabetical. That would drive me insane. Or what's the worst? What's the absolute worst? Kick these people out of the church is by color.
Yep.
Have you ever seen someone do that?
No,
it's awful.
I don't hang around unregenerate people.
Yeah.
Okay. People that organize their books by color are people who they don't like books. They like how books look.
Yeah, yes. Sure.
Now, behind me, I have a ton of leather books. I love how books look, so I get it. But I am too autistic about, having topical. I've got right here is my ancient Greek histories, over here is my kids' books, and then, church history, and right here, detective fiction, which is just, absolute, the mid-century U.S. detective fiction is that is the best reading ever made. I mean,
really?
Yeah, I mean, Nero Wolfe is just, oh, dude, I love it.
Right.
I just started Rebel Yell. I was thinking about you, Sean. I started Rebel Yell yesterday, the story of Stonewall Jackson.
Mm-hmm. So I've also got my shelf of books I haven't read yet right here. This is one that I bought in a used bookstore. It was the only R.L. Dabney book in Half Price Books' entire computer thing.
Wow.
and it happened to be there, and I was like, well, I want to read this because, Dabney was his chief of staff.
Right.
So he would know.
So he would have a very interesting perspective. But I've also heard Rebel Yell is the best one.
Is that right? Okay.
I have heard
the audio recording is not great, so it's going to make for a long. It's a
Really?
25-hour long book, so I'll get it done in 12 and a half. But it's
That's
going to make for a long
shocking.
12 and a half.
That's shocking to me because
Yeah.
it's so popular, and the audiobook is the only way I'd ever get around to it.
Sure.
But
sure.
I've definitely thought about, I've got so much stuff
Yeah.
racked up right now because it's Lent. I'm trying to listen to the Bible more, but there's not a great audio. There's not a great Old Testament audio.
Okay.
Like, I love Johnny Cash for New Testament.
Yeah.
New King James is a great translation. His voice is perfect.
Yep.
Old Testament, I don't have anything like that. So I'm
Well,
listening to kind of
and
default
the way
voice
some
type
people pronounce the Old Testament names, I know it's subjective because these are, most
Sure.
of them dead languages, but it's like in my head, I know how to pronounce it and you said it wrong. It's like, but I love the Alexander Scurby King James Bible, but the way that he pronounces some of those names just makes my teeth grit.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I get that.
All right. Well, we've been going for 2 hours now. That's typically about how long. It doesn't feel like it's been 2 hours, but we should probably hang it up sometime soon.
Do you have anything you want to plug or?
No, I mean, you can follow me at the Jolly Brawler on Twitter. And my brother Samuel is just, I think, at Samuel Holden on Twitter.
Yeah. Well, let me look it up real quick, but I'm pretty sure he's just Samuel Holden. And do you have any rentals that might be available? if there's a young guy who wants to move to your area.
I do. I've always got something open. So right now, I think I've got a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, and I think I've got. Oh no, that's it. That's it right now. I just got the restroom rented.
All right.
Ooh.
So if you're a young man and you're wanting to go to, where are you at? South Idaho?
Yep, South Central.
Okay, so if you're a young based right wing man and you've got a job prospect in South Central Idaho, holler at Ethan Holden. Message him on Twitter. Don't call him because you won't get a hold of him.
You won't get through.
But send him a message. Maybe you can be a future tenant of his. But hopefully, the ideas that we're talking about. It's like Ethan said. The reason that we wanted to do this podcast is because we want more men to be doing exactly what Ethan has achieved. We want you to be successful the way that we've been successful. And we've all been successful in different ways, and but we want to model that for you. We want to bring that to you in a way that you can achieve it, and you can achieve it. Economy's bad right now. Things are tough. And, in all likelihood, things will not get better. But you can succeed. And it's going to suck. And you're going to have to work hard. And you're going to have to make sacrifices. But you can make it. Don't let the world discourage you. Because that is half the battle. If you give up, you will not succeed. You miss all the shots you don't take, right? So, hopefully this podcast has been beneficial to y'all. Do we have any? I don't see any chats, but we'll give it a few minutes. If anybody's got questions that they want to throw at Ethan.
Did Samuel ever get back to you about?
Yeah, see if
he saw the message and promptly ignored it, which I figured he would. There's no way. Dude, well, I'll say this. I'll say 2 things. One, if somebody does have questions about real estate, like I field questions about real estate pretty much all day, every day. Like I'm happy to help answer anything I can, guide any way that I can. We've helped people start their rental businesses. Happy to help, no charge. And secondly, I don't want to presume to be invited back on, but if you guys ever do want to do a podcast strictly on investing and partnerships and stuff like that, and just drill down on some of these things, I'm happy to set aside time to talk about the practicals and all of it. And granted, my experience is limited because I do one particular type of investing. I have one particular type of partnership, and that's not going to work for everybody. But I'm happy to drill down on any of this to help anybody get this information, point them towards resources, any of them.
Mhm.
We're here for it. So,
All right. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how helpful is Dave Ramsey?
so if you want to, I actually do send people to read Dave Ramsey stuff if they do not know how to manage their money.
Mhm.
If you need to learn how to manage your money and you need to learn how to save some, I'll send you to Dave Ramsey. But once you have that down, Robert Kiyosaki.
Yep. Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
He will be much more helpful for you when it comes to investing. But the problem is most of the people I encounter cannot manage their money. And so they have to get that skill down before they go over and learn from Kiyosaki.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. You got to know, a man's got to know his limitations, right? You got to work with what you got. So
that's right.
I think this is a question.
No, it's not. It's an inside joke.
No, I know what it is.
Yeah. So anyway, Ethan will be sending you a package.
Yeah.
I appreciate
it. The guy that looks like Jeff wrote this.
Yeah.
One of my favorite comments of all time, honestly.
Yeah.
Very true. Very true. All right. Brett says, rolling on the floor laughing. Yeah. All right. Well, folks, very, very glad to have you all along for the ride. We appreciate you all sticking with us for this 2-hour show. That seems to be the sweet spot where, if we stay up any longer than that, we're going to be zombies tomorrow. And we have work to do. And hopefully you do too. God has no shortage of work for us to do in the world today. So go to bed, get some sleep, get up tomorrow, and you're going to crush it. You're going to make it. And the only way out is through. So, we wish a happy rest of the Lord's Day for you and yours, and hope everybody has a wonderful night.